A journey through Tibet, starting in Beijing and ending in Kathmandu. To reach Lhasa, we took the Qinghai-Tibet Railway, which runs some 4,000 kilometers or 1,200 miles from Beijing to Lhasa and was completed in 2006. We made a brief stop at Xi'an and had the chance to buy some food from a platform vendor. If the sight of yaks in the countryside were not a good indication that we were nearing Tibet, the sight of Tibetan pilgrims was. Oxygen is pumped into the cars since the railway passes over the Tangula Pass, which at 5,000 meters or 16,500 feet is the world's highest railroad pass. When our train arrived in Lhasa, it was greeted by a section of Chinese soldiers who were prepared to deal with any protests. This army presence was our first inkling that Tibet was an occupied land. We were able to watch our prayer flags being sewn before we
These are new statues. So the key inside here.
The debates are punctuated by vigorous gestures and physical actions which serve to stress the power and decisiveness of the debaters' arguments.
Just pat them on the back, say, go, go!
Lhasa, we drove southwest to Gyantse. We passed by the mighty Brahmaputra River, on which the Chinese are planning to build a hydro dam to the concern of downstream countries such as India. Yak dung patties are frequently seen drying on rural walls as the dung is used in stoves for heating and cooking. At the 5,000 meter or 16,400 foot summit of the Kharola Pass, we stopped to see the Kharola Glacier. There were a number of dogs chained up, and one broke free and bit a woman tourist who was then taken to hospital for a rabies shot.
He bit her. Do I want to go up and see the...
Our drives in Tibet were frequently graced by the presence of bright yellow canola fields, which served to complement the greens of the grasses. Finally, we arrived at Gyantse and were off to climb up the amazing Gyantse Fortress, which was captured by the British during their 1904 invasion of Tibet. In the shadow of the fortress is the impressive Gyantse Monastery, which is surrounded by a long wall reminiscent of the Great Wall of China. Leaving Gyantse, we continued further west to Shigatse. Shigatse is the second largest city in Tibet with a population of about 92,000. The city is located at an altitude of 3,800 meters or 12,600 feet. The Shigatse fortress looks like a mini Potala Palace. It was built in the 15th century as a seat of the king. The huge Tashilhunpo Monastery was founded in 1447 by the first Dalai Lama. It is the traditional seat of the Pachin Lamas. As I was wearing shorts when we visited, I had to wear a wrap to cover my legs. We visited the amazing Gyantse carpet factory to see how Tibetan carpets were made from sheep's wool. We watched the entire process of carpet making, starting from the shearing of the sheep, to the dyeing of wool, to the weaving of the carpets, and finally the trimming of the carpets.
How are you? Good. I'm good.
We were so taken by the beauty of the carpets that we decided to purchase one. As bartering is common in Tibet, we made an offer on a carpet and were told in no uncertain terms that this is a carpet factory, not a bazaar. So we paid the asking price and the factory shipped it home to us. In fact, it arrived home before we made it back. Leaving Shigatse, we continue west to the small town of Sakya. In Sakya, we joined an excited crowd of locals who were mysteriously gazing skywards and pointing. we eventually determined that the cause of the excitement was the crescent moon in the daytime sky. Many of the buildings of the Sakya monastery are in ruins because they were destroyed during the Chinese Cultural Revolution. We hiked on the barren hill overlooking Sakya and were rewarded with views of sheep grazing on the side of a steep hill and a visit to a friendly nunnery. Leaving Sakya, we headed south to Everest Base Camp at the foot of Mount Everest. Soon the Himalaya mountains hove into view. We took lunch in Gyantse town and had the chance to see a fascinating pastoral scene of farmers in their fields and children bathing in the ice-cold stream. Outside of Gyantse, a group of Tibetan women were blocking the road as an unofficial toll booth. Arriving near Everest Base Camp, we stayed in a tent that was heated by a stove burning dried yak dung. As the skies were mainly clear, we hiked off to the actual site of Everest Base Camp. The hike was challenging due to the altitude of 5,200 meters or 17,000 feet. It was very exciting to see Mount Everest appear between breaks in the clouds, and we could see the high winds streaming off Everest's summit. Arriving at Everest Base Camp, we had excellent views of the impressive Himalayan peaks. We passed a cold night in our tent, and in the morning the weather was completely socked in with Everest not to be seen. Later in Kathmandu, we took a flight past Everest to see its south side in Nepal. Leaving Everest Base Camp, we made the long drive to the border crossing at Padari into Nepal. It was disconcerting to see prostrating Tibetan Buddhists making their long pilgrimages along busy roads as vehicles whizzed by them at speed. We stopped for lunch and were able to watch a nomad couple quickly set up their simple tent while their son tried to herd their sheep. The sheep outwitted the young nomad herder. Stopping, we watched a hip young Tibetan successfully herding yaks. We left the cold of the Tibetan plateau and descended down into a wet valley on a very narrow and poorly maintained road. The roof of the bus only cleared the side of the rock cutting by inches. At the border at Koderi, we had to line up for an hour to exit through the Chinese border control. Our luggage was searched for contraband such as Dalai Lama books, and we passed through scanners like at an airport. After entering Nepal, we headed to Kathmandu on the Amiko highway, which is a poorly maintained mountain road. In Nepal, the lush and verdant countryside contrasted sharply with the dryness of the Tibetan plateau that we had just left. Durbar Square consists of the plazas and areas opposite the old royal palaces of Nepal. It contains an amazing collection of sights, people, and pigeons. We visited the Kumarigar Palace, wherein dwells a prepubescent girl who is considered as a living goddess until she menstruates. after which it is believed the goddess vacates her body, and so a new living goddess must be found. In the square we met a couple of colorfully dressed sadhus, or Hindu holy men. Moving across the square was a ceaseless procession of porters, shifting impressively large loads. The Thamel is a popular tourist area in Kathmandu with a wide variety of restaurants and shops, in one of which we purchased a beautiful oriental carpet. The Boudhanath Stupa is one of the largest stupas in the world. It was built during the 5th century AD and is now home to a number of Tibetan monasteries, created following a large influx of Tibetan refugees fleeing Chinese rule of their homeland. The area around the Boudhanath Stupa is a hive of activity and full of wonderful sounds.
Carrying the basket.
We left Kathmandu for our next destination of South Africa.
Take me somewhere nice, to some tired island in your heart called paradise.